Good morning. Thank y'all for being with us. We are in John, chapter 19. And we ended off with 37. We'll start off with 38 today. Last week we essentially kind of left Jesus on the cross is where we ended. And we know that there's more to it than just him being stuck on the cross. But as we talked, the disciples and all those followers of Jesus, they thought that was it. And just imagine how they spent the next 3 days in grief. And we're going to talk a little about the burial process today. But first, John 19:38. And after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for the fear of the Jews, besought Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate gave him leave. He came therefore and took the body of Jesus. And then came also Nicodemus, which at the first came to Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight. All right, stop right there for a second. Who is Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus? Most of us are aware of Nicodemus, but we'll get him in a second. Joseph of Arimathea. He is part of the Sanhedrin Council, and that's from Luke chapter 23:50. He is part of the ruling sector. He's a secret follower of Jesus. Why is he a secret follower of Jesus? We talked about this when Jesus healed the blind man. And they called his parents up. It was like, is this your son? Yes. Well, how did he get blind? They said, go ask him. He's of age. They didn't want to give that straight answer of, well, he said Jesus healed him. Because by doing that, they would essentially have been excommunicated from the Jewish community. They've been kicked out of the temple. And, well, you just can't go to church there anymore. It's not like it is today. It's not like there's a church on every corner. If you don't like this church believes, you can go to the next one down the road and you can find one. If you want a church, I use an example quite a bit, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. If you want a church that's nothing but a church in name that makes you feel good, they're out there. But that wasn't that way back then. Commerce ran through the temple, around the temple. Your sacrifices had to go through the temple. If there was a public hearing, a meeting where they were trying to talk to people, they went to the temple. That was the center of society, was the temple. Joseph of Arimathea, he was one of those select few who had climbed the ladder to where he was a ruling person. And he did not want to jeopardize that out of fear of what would happen to him and his family. So he was a secret follower of Jesus. And there's more to this, and I will talk about in a second. He's a wealthy man. Matthew 27:57. It says, sorry, I'm at the wrong place. Mark 26:57. Matthew, when the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. So, he was a rich man. He was part of the Sanhedrin council. And let me get through all this and we'll talk more about that. Honorable counselor, Mark 15:43. Jesus didn't just come for the poor, those with nothing. He came for everybody. And Joseph wasn't everybody. Yeah, was he a part of the elite crowd of the Jewish leadership? Yes, he was. Jesus came just for him, the same he came for that blind man on the street who had nothing, who sat there and had to ask for alms because he couldn't see the work. And Jesus was there for everybody. This was an interesting part. The legends of Joseph of Arimathea. You know, I didn't realize that there was some of these legends about him. Y'all two may. First one, the uncle of Jesus' mother. So Mary's uncle. Legend. So Bible doesn't support that. So in the process of after Jesus passes, it is rumored that he traveled to Britain. It said in order of trade. I don't know, it didn't specify what he was trading, but he was going back from Jerusalem to Britain. And during this process, he carried the gospel to Britain. And it is, by legend, he founded the first church in England. And Glastonbury, England, is where he, in theory, that's what medieval legend has. The other part, in his travels to and from Britain, he carried the Holy Grail to Great Britain. So, everybody familiar with the Holy Grail? It was a cup Jesus drank from at the Last Supper, and it was a cup that caught his blood at the crucifixion. And it's supposed to have mythical powers because of it caught Jesus' blood. And they believe he was initially the first protector of the Holy Grail. And legend has it that he carried it from Jerusalem into Britain. And this is also where, if you've ever seen Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, that third one, the last really good one, Indiana Jones, just throw that out there. They go looking for the Holy Grail. Well, if you ever heard about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, they go looking for the Holy Grail. In legends, I just thought it was neat in legends, he was the first protector of that. Now, is that true or not? I don't know. Is there a cup? Did Jesus drink from a cup at the Last Supper? Yes. Did the rest of that happen? I don't know. Could Jesus' blood empower a cup? I don't know. There is a scene. Have y'all ever? I know some of us younger ones. There's a movie called Ben-Hur. There's a newer one, but there's an older one where it actually showed Jesus dying on the cross, and it starts raining, and his blood washes off of him in like a little stream, and these two ladies who were in prison wrongly touched. It's Ben-Hur's sister and mom. But they touch the blood and they're healed of their leprosy. I mean, there's all type of fables and stuff that's come up about Jesus, and I don't know if that's true or not. I know this. I know he hung on the cross for us, and his touch could heal you. And if you met him in the right condition, you could touch his garment and it would heal you too. So, those are some. Also, by legend, he died at the age of 86. So had a very long life, and very, by legend, a very neat life. Nicodemus. Nicodemus was a Pharisee and a leader of the Jews. And that's from John, we got several months ago, John chapter 3, verse 1. Member of the Sanhedrin, John chapter 7, 50 and 51. Real quick, John, we're introduced to John and to Nicodemus, and he's visiting Jesus by night. We talked about this before, multiple reasons. He was sent there by the Pharisees to see if Jesus is someone they could use, if they could, attach themselves to Jesus. Jesus is a pretty popular person. Can we ride his coattails and bring him into us? With all this popularity, we'll be setting free. That was one. Second, he was sent to question him by the Pharisees. Let's see what he's about. Third is true, genuine. Let's see what this man is. I was like, Nicodemus will know the scripture. Jesus is healing people. I want to see what Jesus is really about. And I'm going to go at nighttime where the whole crowds are not there and I can have some one-on-one time with Jesus. In my head, that's what I've always thought. Could it be one of the others? Yes. But we know, no matter what, Nicodemus left that night a changed individual. He was, for whatever reason, he did not leave the same as he walked. Coming in the door and leaving the door, he was a changed person. You cannot sit down and have a genuine conversation with Jesus without being changed. You can't do it. Those who have a conversation with Jesus and don't leave changed, they didn't have a genuine conversation. They were present in body. I tell them at work all the time, the last hour of your day, say, well, I'm here in body, but not mind. That's how this conversation with Jesus works. Jesus is trying to commune with you, and you're there in body, but you're not there in mind. And it's not going to, there's going to be no change. But there was a change. He was wealthy. You know how we know he was wealthy? 39. John 19:39, back to where we're at. And there came also Nicodemus, which at the first came to Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100-pound weight. Believed to be around 75 to 100 pounds of myrrh, other spices to anoint the body. We'll get into this burial process in just a second. But first, do you know what today's value is of what he brought? So he brought 75 to 100 pounds of the things they used to embalm the body. Today's value is $150,000 to $200,000. The man had some money. And this goes back to, he made the change in Jesus changed in his life. You don't just spend that type of money on anybody. You do not turn loose that much money. I mean, that was someone that I believe that Nicodemus at that point knew was a Messiah. And he took the very best he had to embalm Jesus' body. Well, they didn't embalm, to apply the spices and myrrh to his body. And I got to reading through this. You know how God always has a plan? God always has a plan. Of everybody we've heard in the Gospels, all the disciples, all the people, who else, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say something else, who else could have got Jesus' body from Pilate so quickly? You don't think it was planned that God allowed Joseph of Arimathea to be in the position he was in? He was in a leadership role for the Jews. More than likely, we saw how this council, the Sanhedrin, how it influenced Pilate to crucify Jesus. So when Jesus died, it was getting close to the high day, which was another Sabbath. Joseph was able, I believe, by his position, get an audience with Pilate and go ask Pilate for the body of Jesus. I think Joseph was meant to be in that position so he could go ask for Jesus' body so they could get it off the cross. And then, I think Nicodemus was put in the position he was, for one, to help influence, after he left that night, to help influence those individuals, but also the value of those spices. Jesus was buried like a king. Think about, you hear about the extravagant things that these pharaohs are buried with, the gold. They're buried in a tomb made just for them. Jesus was put in a tomb that nobody had ever been in. And we'll talk about that more in a second, but he's put in a tomb that nobody had ever been in. And he was laid to rest with $200,000 in our time worth of spices. He was put to rest with multiple years worth of someone's living. So I've never thought about it that way until last night, thinking through how God had it all planned out. These people were right where they needed to be, and God gave them a heart that they would seek after the body of Jesus and make sure that was taken care of. So some legends about Nicodemus, baptized by Peter and John. And some scholars believe that he is a figure named Nicodemus ben Goran. This was a follower of Jesus. He was, before he verbally expressed or openly expressed his faith, he was a very wealthy man. Afterwards, he lost everything he had due to his faith. Some scholars, there's no, they can't prove it, but it's from some scholars will relate them to it. Either way, Nicodemus, just as he had, they were followers of God, and they had a heart for Jesus. So, the burial process. When Nicodemus and Joseph, everything, they went and got Jesus' body, there's a process they go through. Typically, when someone dies, they're buried within 28 to 24 hours of death. And with Jesus, he died at the 6th hour? 9th hour. 3 o'clock. They had 3 hours to prepare him before it became that high day. So they're in a rush. So once they get the body, it's washed, and they begin to wrap it in linens, a linen cloth. Like we go through the embalming process when someone dies. Jewish folks do not embalm the deceased. It's not like in the Egyptians where they embalm. They put the person to their final resting, or it's not their final resting place, we'll talk about that again in a second, but they put them to rest within 8 to 24 hours. They did Jesus in 3. And what they did, once they washed the body, They begin wrapping the body. Each layer, they put the myrrh and these aloes and these spices around the body. What these are for is to cover up the stench of a decaying body. That's what that's for. So as they wrap it, they're putting spices, and they wrap and put spices. Once they wrap the body, they put a handkerchief over the face. And then they lay the body in a tomb. Then they go through the process called the second burial, which takes place around a year after the individual has died. At that point, they go in, they gather the bones, they place those bones in a small limestone box, and then they plaster that little box into the wall of the tomb. So there would be multiple generations who are buried within that one tomb. Jesus had ran into tomb no one had ever been buried in. Also, we know that Jesus didn't go through this second burial. Jesus went to the first one and then woke up before the third. There's also goes into the mourning period. We talked a little bit about this when Jesus went to see Mary and Martha when Lazarus had passed away. Before the burial, the initial part, the individual known in mourning is known as the omen. People are focusing strictly on getting that person embalmed, preparation for the grave. So that's what Joseph and Nicodemus, this is the process they were in. They also, at this point in time, they're not worried about anything else other than this, and they start focusing on their mourning. They're actually, once the person who is in mourning, they're excused from any type of positive commandments, such as they don't have to go to the temple to pray. Or we talked about this one with the telephone, which is they don't have to wear the telephone, which is a small leather box that they put on their robes, and it contains a piece of parchment. It's like us carrying Bible verses around. They would do the same thing with the Torah. They would have a little box, put their favorite part of the Torah in there, and they would carry it around with them to help them remind them of what the Torah said. Same thing with us. We have Bible verses on shirts, on everything. Similar to us. The next part of the mourning process is the Shiva, S-H-I-V-A. This is a 7-day period immediately after the burial. The family stays at home. They don't go anywhere. They sit low on the ground. They'll sit on a box or on the ground. Reason why they sit on this is symbolic. Them sitting on the floor or on a small box, that symbolizes them being brought low or struck down with grief. They don't wear any leather shoes. Now, we say that and we're like, well, leather shoes, They didn't have the technology we have. Leather shoes were comfortable. And they also covered their mirrors. Because at this point in time, they didn't care how they looked, and they weren't worried about comfort. They were reflecting on the deceased in themselves and not how they look. And also during this time, the community is coming to visit, and they're coming to check on them and coming to bring them food to make sure they're okay. And this is where this is a 7-day process. Jesus is only let them go through for half of this. The rest of the process goes into the Shulamith, which is 30 days after the burial. It includes the 7 days, and this is when folks start going back to work. But they still don't go out. They don't go out to entertainment. They just go to work and go back to normal lives. If it is a parent, spouse, the mourning lasts for 11 months, and they do a prayer each day, which is a Mourner's Kaddish. And the Mourner's Kaddish, it's just, the English translation is, may his great name, or this is what the English translation of the prayer is, may his great name grow exalted and sanctified in the world that he created as he will. May he give rain to his kingship in your lifetimes and in your days, and in the lifetimes of the entire family of Israel, swiftly and soon. Every morning they get up and say this little prayer. And it's supposed to help soothe them and remind them, this is where we're different. This is supposed to help remind them that God is sending his Messiah to save them. And that's where the Jewish hope is. Their hope is that God's going to send a Messiah to rescue them. Pre-Jesus, this would have been an accurate prayer to say. It's not accurate anymore. Jesus walked a little over 2,000 years ago. This is not accurate prayer anymore. Then once a year, I'm not going to cry. The name is what this is called is YHRZEIT. And essentially, it's an annual remembrance where you light a candle in that person's honor. You say the Kaddish on the anniversary of their death, and you just reflect on your time with them, your memories of them, and that takes place every year after a loved one has passed. Now, I went through all of that so you understand what these folks are going through. They buried Jesus. They went through the process. They washed the body, cleaned the body up fat quickly. They wrapped him in the linen, put the spices in there, and Jesus has the audacity to only give him 3 days to mourn. He didn't let him go through all the rituals. But their mindset is, we've got to get this done. We've got to go through all of this because this is what our traditions say. And they treated Jesus very carefully, his body very carefully. They buried him like a king. And they left and thought, well, this is it. We've done everything we can, and this is it. You get to 40. Then took they the body of Jesus and wound it in linen, clothes, with the spices, as a manner of the Jews is to bury. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre, wherein was never man yet laid. There lay the Jesus, therefore, because the Jews' preparation day for the sepulchre was nigh hand. Also, we need to say this. If Joseph and Nicodemus had not gone to claim Jesus' body, he would have been cast. Where is my note? Sorry. There was for those who were not claimed, they're basically went out and thrown in a ditch. The two other malefactors, there's a good chance that's what happened to them. No one claimed them. They died by crucifixion, so they just go and toss them in the ditch. They have a ravine, no fancy burial, just no purpose. You just discard the body. righteous as a king, he couldn't have been buried that way. So, does anybody have anything for me? We got a couple of minutes, we can jump into 20. Does anybody have anything?
Brother Steve, what's called? It's the Valley of something.
I had it. It starts with an H.
But they were talking about the other day in their leadership services, the guy that did the burial said God would not allow his son to be treated in disrespect. And another thing being amazing was how close that tomb was to the crucifixion, where they, to Golgotha, they didn't have far to carry his body. And it's like Brother Adam said, they had a place that they just tossed their bodies. And many times they would set them on fire.
It is a valley of Hinnom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But that's where they're put after crucifixion. As it said, God wouldn't allow his son to be shown that disrespect.
Yeah.
And so it's all through the Lord's planning that tomb that Joseph prepared probably wasn't going to be where he was buried, because him being wealthy, he wasn't going to be buried that close to that valley and everything. But you were right on target. But a lot of it just God was not going to allow his son to be disrespected.
I had never really thought about that whole process of Jesus actually is like we're so focused on the crucifixion and him being put in a tomb, but his burial was
Very important.
It was. He was buried like a king.
Yeah.
He received a better burial than I would say most of the people in Jerusalem, just because of the amount. Go ahead.
And then it all got done so quickly.
Yeah.
Too, before they were out of time, it was the Sabbath. That's amazing too.
Because he died at 3 o'clock. They had 3 hours. 3 hours to get the body, or go to Pilate, get the body, carry the body. I guess they would do. Now, this is nothing it would say. It's where they prepared the body. I don't know. If someone died at home, I bet they would prepare it at home and carry back to the tomb. But somewhere along the line, they had to wash the body and then begin to wrap. And I don't know about you, 100 pounds, this is the logistics of you're carrying a body, plus you're carrying another 100 pounds worth of spices, plus all the other loose stuff.
Some say that the normal person is only given 20 pounds of organ as far as preparation. So, like you said, his burial was like a king. It wasn't just like an ordinary person. And of course, God had all this planned out from the beginning for Joseph to have the tomb where he had it.
You had, it's amazing how you think through how God works. God doesn't shoot from the hip. He doesn't. God's very strategic.
No, that's called God by surprise.
No, God was prepared. I know people who are always prepared for stuff, and a couple of them are sitting here to our rights, and they have backups to their backups to their backup. And because they're prepared for case A, B, C, D, and Z. God's prepared for A because he knows what A is. And so he puts everything in place before it gets there. You won't catch somebody off guard when you're going to have a conversation with someone you know is going to be difficult. Be over prepared. Be more prepared than any other person should be, and just watch how that person reacts. Because if you show up for a meeting and you're prepared and you know the other person's not, you just need to watch. I've been in some of those here recently, and everything went in my favor because I was ready. He he come hunting squirrels, and I came hunting elephants. But that's how God is. Joseph was right where he needed to be to do everything he needed to do. Nicodemus was right where he needed to be so he could supply those spices and help with Jesus' body. The disciples fled. You would think those 11 would have been right there to help with this. They're not. And God knew that. Even John, who Jesus talks about, this is your mother, behold thy mother, or behold thy son. John wasn't there. John was right there at the crucifixion. When Jesus died, more than likely John took Mary back to his home. God knew what was going to happen and got everything worked out. Jesus passed away so quickly. Because one scripture says Pilate was amazed that he had already passed. And then everything worked out. This reminder, this reminder, we all go through stuff, and each time it's hard to figure out why, because we can't see what's going on. God has a plan, and things will work out according to God's plan. When Jesus is something that's as sorrowful as buried in Jesus, God had a plan for that, and it couldn't work out any better. Same with our lives. You let God drive, it'll work out better than you can ever imagine. And we'll end there. Thank y'all so much.